Michael, it's been some time since we've had a chat about matters on the Isle of Man. What's been going on? I don't know, the last couple of months. It's going up, it's going down, going crazy.
Indeed, lots of action in the local community, which is good fun. The winter sports are coming to a conclusion. The summer sports are beginning to warm up, and life is pretty good. It's been sunny here for a good couple of weeks now. It's quite remarkable. I don't know where I am anymore.
Well, the thing is, it's just been quoted, it's been the driest March since the 1950s. Can you believe that?
That I can actually. That's pretty remarkable. It's pretty special. I think it's about time we got some good news on climate change, and, and this seems to be the beginnings.
Yeah, that seems to have dropped off the perch a little bit. But no, it will mean that we can send out some great media about the Isle of Man, where the place is swashed in sunshine. I don't know whether you've seen some of the Visit Isle of Man output in the last year or so, but I think they were quite unlucky with the days where they had the camera in action. Everyone was wearing a raincoat, there's anoraks galore, there's rain dripping off the trees, and the place looked a little bit cloudy, so hopefully they'll have the right kit out, in the next week or so.
Yeah, I don't think we live here for the weather, mate.
Well, fingers crossed. We'll get into a good spring and have a good TT. But there's no doubt about it. In my
I
trade,
do say that with a very thick Australian accent. So these things are relative, but these things are each of their own. So anyway, it is what it is.
The thing is, on the tourism front,
doesn't stop the politicians trying that.
Now, on the tourism front, bookings are good this year. That you speak to the hotels, they're in good shape. So we need some money coming into the island, don't we?
Sure, I guess tourism is a small part of that, but I think that good economic recovery would be good. Talking of news over the last couple of months, we had the release of the government's most recent economic figures, which was for the 2023 financial year, which showed a 5% contraction in the GDP of the Isle of Man, which, if it happened to any other community in the world, it would be a monumental, colossal news story, leading to some pretty serious, hard questions being asked of our nation's leaders. But here it seemed to have gone hardly without a trace.
Well, funny you should say that. I took the time to attend the government conference in September, and despite being distracted by the armed police wandering round, I was a little bit perturbed about the speech given by Mr. Cannon, where he introduced the fact that 10 million in public spending had to be saved. And this was going to happen. It's like, from now, this is it. The guillotine was coming down. But since then, and since I think the address that followed was the chap Andy Ralphs, who's the recently departed chief exec, for the Isle of Man. I think he top and tailed that there were going to be some hard times ahead and some measures taken to cut the civil service. But it all seemed to have faded away.
Yeah, well, I think there's some significant reform needed in that. A 5% contraction in the economy of the Isle of Man is a major crisis, and it needs to be addressed. Elsewhere, there was a good little survey produced by the Institute of Directors recently, and they, let me read some of the notes off here, that 40% anticipate increased business investment, which sounds positive, but 51%, so a slight majority, described their outlook for the island's economy as either pessimistic or neutral, with 47%, so almost the same number, saying overall confidence, having overall confidence in the Isle of Man's economy. And in addition, some significant issues about recruitment challenges, immigration concerns, and also the ongoing difficulties with labour market pressures.
Well, I think if you look around the landscape, certainly for development, that's a strong indicator how well an economy is doing. You'd think with some of the projects that are going on, there's housing estates that are being, extended, widened, broadened. We've got the hotel, which is being put into the centre of town. But there are still some vacant sites dotted
Given that,
around Douglas City.
Jed, I think you've missed today's news. That has been withdrawn, the application to build the
Oh no, the one that's been built already.
Lord Street.
No. The one that's by Regent Street, Travel Lodge. So
Oh, yeah.
that's in progress at the moment. So there's some green shoots there, but dotted around Douglas, you've still got that travesty on the quay. But yeah, Lord Street, I believe the plans have been pulled, but they've said they're going to introduce some new plans later on. So it's not completely dead, but this circus has been going on for some time. But if you do cast your eye onto the courts, there's some sort of legal claim now, isn't there, going in?
Yeah, I think that was
against
from one of
government.
the previous applicants and so on. So I think we had so many different plans and so much talk, and like the Elvis Presley song was, I think we need a little less conversation, a little more action, please.
But you can imagine, say, if there was an order by the judge to ask government to cough up, say, 80 million quid. We ain't got it. We have not got that money. We don't have money to do a basic refurb in our public buildings now.
Well, I don't know if that's true. Like there is a significant chunk of money in that the Isle of Man government has in reserves, and in addition, the Isle of Man government owns a bunch of other assets as well. But certainly, what is true is that we shouldn't be wasting that money, which is why takes us back to that point you made a few moments ago, that this government needs significant reform, and unfortunately, we have a Treasury Minister that wants to slug people of the Isle of Man with higher taxes and higher fees for worse services and lesser services. And so I think that people can understand paying for what you get or some sort of mix around there. But when this Treasury Minister, has done his consultation, as it were, on this health levy. And so if you remember the story there is that the national income tax rate was 20%. Then they increased it to 22% as a temporary adjustment pending the introduction of the levy. Then they decided that was going to be permanent, that 22%. Then they reduced it to 21%, which is sort of like, it's like a thief in the street robs your handbag and then gives you half of your money back, and they expect you to be grateful for returning half. It's just bonkers. And so now, in addition to that increased permanent income tax rate, Alex Allenton is now wanting to hit people with another 2%. And they do this nonsense consultation where they are asking questions that they already know the answers to. We can see that in the way that they phrase those questions.
And just looking at the maths there, so we went to 22, then to 21, and now we're going to go into 23.
Yeah.
So that's it. So a 3% increase isn't really 3%, is it? 2% is 10%. Is a bit more, isn't it, as well? So we're looking at a massive hike. But there's one thing I'd like to know, is that we pride ourselves on the introduction of these high net worths, who come in and they're tax capped at £200,000 or something like that. But what I've seen is that those agreements, they're tied in for 5 or 10 years. I'd be really interested to know whether they're having to break that agreement with them and they're getting charged an extra 2% or 3%. I don't think so.
So with the income tax agreement, that goes both ways. And so it's not just a cap, but it's also a floor. And so if you have less income in a given year, you don't get a discount. And so I think that you'll find that those agreements remain the case. And then this new NHS levy, which Alex Allenton wants to hit everyone from, contemplates a possibility of being on top of and in addition to any income tax. So therefore, people who receive money that would not normally be taxable, such as the tax cap people, such as the few other loopholes like the lieutenant governor's income is normally not taxed, but all those sort of things would be subject to the tax, along with people receiving other forms of benefits that might or might not be taxable, which I think is also really concerning, because at the same time that Alex Allenton wants to hit people with higher taxes, the working people, he also wants to cut the pensions of retired people. So you're getting each way. You're getting higher taxes and lower services.
It's funny, you mentioned the governor there, and I like the chap. I like what he brought to the island, but surely his parting is now time to draw a line under this. It's a £700,000 bill, isn't it? I think to run the governor and government house and all the shenanigans around it. And are we getting true value for money? Can we afford that?
That's a good question. Absolutely.
I just don't think these luxuries, the statesman-like approach that we have to Tynwald and all the regalia and all the traditions, I just don't think we can afford that. I don't think we can afford to have a government that's based on a system that's over 100 years old, with 24 House of Keys members, the MLCs, and then beyond that, 100 local councillors. I don't get it.
It's quite extraordinary. And what we've just discovered just now, in fact, is that we have, as part of the Tynwald's appointment of the latest batch of members of the Legislative Council, the newest members of Tynwald, let us be honest, there are, one member in particular, in my opinion, has said some pretty vile and disgusting things about Jews in particular. And so what was really extraordinary to me to discover just recently is that those people did not even do a police background check. And that's quite extraordinary, because you got to do a police background check to be a taxi driver. You got to be a police background check. I do some volunteering where I chat to schools and community groups about graves and so on, and I got to do a police background check for that. The umpires of our Saturday and Sunday weekend sports all have to do police background checks.
Yeah.
But the politicians who are appointed by their mates don't have to do a police background check, and I think that's just quite extraordinary. And I guess the only saving grace, I think the best reason that to not have a police background check for these people is that you probably wouldn't get anyone through the police background check. It'd be a ghost town in there.
That is astonishing, isn't it? What a loophole you've got there. Who knows? Blimey. But there's certainly occasion to have reform, and I have it in my mind that if this current government was, say, a Premiership football team, and it seems that they're shipping goals every week, they're getting humiliated on the pitch, and they've got a board of directors, who just aren't up to it, and the place is falling apart. You'd be looking at having a clean sweep, wouldn't you? A new management, a new coach. You'd be looking at changing everything, because
I think it's not just a matter of opinion; it's about matters of fact. And the facts are that the economy contracted for the last financial year for which their records are available. They're wanting to hit people with higher taxes. They're wanting to cut pensions, and then they get these various scumbags into the Legislative Council. And so I think it just shows really disappointing standards of behaviour.
But if you had a true public opinion poll, an independent body to come in, and the population was scanned, I can't see a great degree of happiness amongst the Manx public and the young people, the Democrats.
We have them.
All that stuff.
We have them, and they're called elections. Frankly, obviously, I stood at the last election. I lost, and I obviously accepted the results of that. But elections matter, Jed, and unfortunately, we're getting what we voted for. And as one business owner down on the prom said to me not long ago, he said, "Yeah, we're getting what we voted for, and we're getting plenty of it." So elections matter. And so I think that for people out here listening to this, let's hope that there are some good people who will stand up and put their name forward and to represent change. I think in the elections of the local councillors, which have been substantially uncontested, which is a bit underwhelming, there have been a few folks here in Douglas who I think represent a desire for change, and let's hope that they're successful.
I think with the local council elections, I think anyone who's perhaps got a bit of mettle to really make an impact on the island, they're probably not going to waste time on the local front. That's not me being disparaging. I think anyone would be saving themselves for the national election. I'd say that there must be an appetite in the public now to bring that national election forward a year if they could. I really think that there's desperate measures that need to be taken, because we've got another 18 months of this Parliament, and I can't see any dramatic changes, any policy U-turns. It's like, the ship is like heading towards that iceberg.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, we've got this hard left faction who are, ultra woke and sending us broke, and it's a bit of a concerning development, but it is what it is.
Just ask you a question. Do you think the wind farm projects will be completed? The one down at Erie Stain?
I don't know. It seems like such a palaver, and so, Jed, I remember speaking with you a couple of years ago on one of these chats. And I think it was immediately before I ran for Tynwald in 2020 and during the COVID period. And I had a conversation with you and others at the time online that where I just assumed that anyone who wanted to put their name up for public office would do the research. I subsequently discovered that no one else did this, but I contacted one of the environmental scientists involved in the deployment of wind farms in the Republic of Ireland, on land wind farms. And her view as a professional environmental scientist was that the rigmarole and palaver of going through all the environmental impact assessments and environmental checks made it not realistically viable to bother putting wind farms on land in these isles, because although they might be cheaper to access and operate and to maintain, the costs of planning and all that palaver that's required of finding, the random rare bat or the random rare spider that no one ever knew existed before but is now really important for the ecological sustainability, made that palaver just simply such a waste of time and not viable, and that the much more likely and easier option is to put dozens of these things out at sea, especially in the case of the Isle of Man, where we only have a limited amount of land. How many wind farms or how many wind turbines are you actually going to install on the Isle of Man? Maybe a couple. But it was just too much work, too much effort, and that was at a time when interest rates were at record lows, and so therefore the capital costs were very low. However, now we're in a higher interest rate environment. The costs of all this planning delays and obfuscation. Look, that word is so complicated, I can't even say it right. The cost of all those delays, the capital cost, is extraordinary and growing because we're now in a different economic environment with higher interest rates. Which made the argument for why are we having this argument to install it here when just put it out on the sea where it doesn't really affect anyone in any meaningful way, and solve the whole problem.
I think they're just kicking it in the long grass now for the next election. I don't think we're going to see any movement, in the next 18 months, which is desperate when you think of the amount of money.
I don't know if that's right, because we are seeing movement. And so, for example, I drove down south, down your way towards Castletown the other day, and the guys had the chainsaws out trimming back at the fairy tree or the fairy bridge and or the trees around there. And so there is action. That is that they're chopping down the trees or harvesting the trees or pruning the trees or trimming the trees. And I'm not sure exactly what stage they were at there, but cutting trees to protect the environment seems pretty surprising to me.
I don't think.
But then again, I'm just a normal person. I'm not one of these political freaks.
I don't think the planning has gone through yet, though.
Well, I can tell you, I saw the chainsaws trimming the trees so that they could get the planning the blades or the turbine blades or whatever. Right? And so I can tell you they had chainsaws in and around the trees. I don't think that they were completely chopping down the trees, but rather I suspect they were just pruning or trimming them back in some form or another. But that seems like a curious way to improve the environment of the Isle of Man.
Well, I'm pretty sure that the planning hasn't been passed as yet, so we'll watch this space, so to speak. And you like to do a bit of travelling. What do you think about the prospect of not being allowed to pay cash for your steam packet boat ticket?
So the claim from the government, or not claim from government, the claim from the steam packet appears to have been that they were concerned about criminals paying for their tickets in cash. If that is true, and I cannot verify whether or not what the steam packet is true, but as human adults, we've got to trust what they're saying is true. If what they're saying is true, then it makes no sense. Because if you have a method that identifies people who are very likely to be criminals, then abolishing that payment method doesn't make the criminals go away. It just makes it harder to identify them. And so I used to work in combating fraud. And if we had a method that allowed us to identify people who were supposedly likely to be criminals, we would be very welcome to having that, because we'd want to identify who the bad people are. And so I cannot comprehend either they are saying something that is untrue, or they're not really thinking in terms of what's safe for the Isle of Man. Because if you have a method that allows people that you think allows criminals to come here, then what you do is you get the people who are paying by cash and you inspect them.
Simple. But I do wonder. I think,
and of course, by inspecting people and by checking carefully whether these are actually criminals, which who knows if that's true or not, then it allows those people who have a genuine need to pay by cash for whatever reason, it allows them to travel safely and securely along with everyone else.
I do wonder, though, if I walked into a travel agent's in Manchester with cash and paid for a ticket to go to the Isle of Man on the ferry, how could that be reconciled? I don't see that. I do wonder. We've got this money val inspection coming up, haven't we? And maybe it's just another tick in the box to say, we've cut the head off this possible option for money laundering and so forth, criminal activity coming into the island.
So that's a good point, Jed, about this box ticking exercise. And I did look into some research around this a couple of years ago, in that there's a whole bunch of academic research on the impacts of these rules and compliance costs and so on. And that includes both direct costs and indirect costs. And I want to read this to you because this is quite extraordinary. So that compliance costs, so this is from Matthew Lesh, who's one of the people who brought this to my attention. Global compliance costs for anti-money laundering regulation is in the order of $304 billion. It's about $304 billion to investigate this. How much money do you think is seized from criminal funds as a result of this? It costs us $300 billion. How much do you reckon is seized from criminals as a result of this?
I've got a feeling it's not going to be up to $300 billion, is it?
Obviously, it's three,
No.
right?
No.
So we're spending $300 billion a year as humans to catch $3 billion and it's so what it means is for every £100 that is spent, about £1 is seized from criminals, right? And that just doesn't pass the smell test. That's just nonsense.
And of course, on the island, financial regulation is keeping a lot of people employed anyway, isn't it?
Well, it's not keeping people employed. It's keeping people unemployed, because if you didn't have to fill out all those forms and check boxes and so on, people would be able to do something more productive with their time. And so that is not a benefit. Like the cost of all these compliance rules is not a benefit. It's a cost. When you have to waste $300 billion a year across the world, that is not a benefit. It's like if you pay someone to dig a hole and then the next day you pay him to fill it in and dig a hole a metre to the right. That's not a benefit. That's a cost, right? And so we need to...
For the island, there's probably, say, 2,000 people employed in compliance. Probably.
Sure. That's 2,000 people of cost. And those people could be doing something else much better and more productive than filling out checkboxes. Because we know the research shows that for every $100 or £100 that is spent on that, it's only $1 or £1 of cash seized from criminals.
Interesting perspective. Well, we're just coming up to 25 minutes, Michael. As ever, lovely to have a chat and get your insight onto things, and perhaps we can meet up again and see what more is spilling out of the government machine.
Good. Let's look forward to that, Jed. And in the meantime, have a happy spring. Enjoy the forthcoming Easter break and everything that's ahead.
Lovely. All the best.